You're listening to a production of SportsLink Digital Radio.
It is homecoming weekend here at Ball State University, and it was a jam-packed week of football last week, but we are back for this week. Welcome to episode number 3 of Behind the Lines, as we have a wonderful Friday show today. And as always, my partner Ryan Stojitz. Ryan, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
Doing great. Excited for a fun weekend of football, and I know big occasion for Ball State with homecoming tomorrow against Central Michigan. Looking to get back into the win column, so looking forward to talking some football this afternoon.
And once again, we have another special guest. Our very own MC of the bed races, Max Gilly. Max, how are you doing?
I am doing great. Homecoming 2023 has been great, and we are looking to end it on a high note here at Ball State University, Central Michigan, Ball State. It's going to be fun, but overall with college football, it's always entertaining. But as we get into the fall, it starts to get cold, and the games get a lot more exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the times when you start to see those Tuesday, Wednesday night Maction games. So we'll be getting into those very shortly in the next upcoming weeks. But we do still have that Saturday game coming up tomorrow. It's finally Friday, guys, so let's just jump right into it. The Ball State Cardinals lost against Toledo, a very close 13-6 loss, trying to bounce back on homecoming against Central Michigan. Ryan, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, with that, looking back at that Toledo game, Toledo's one of the best teams in the MAC. I think coming into that game, they were averaging about 40 points a game. And Ball State gave them all they could handle. Yes, it was rainy and it was windy, but at the end of the day, Ball State put a really strong defensive effort on. And offensively, they had some chances. They had some drives get, deep into Toledo territory that they just really couldn't cash in, had to settle for field goals, and also had to punt at times when they were on Toledo's side of the field. So offensively, a little bit lacking, but defensively, a phenomenal effort holding Toledo to 13 points. And they didn't even score a touchdown until the fourth quarter. So Ball State's defense, if they play like that against Central Michigan, I think they should be in really good shape, because Central Michigan, they come in ranked 7th in the MAC in points scored per game, so they don't really have that explosive offense like Toledo. They've got some playmakers, but I think for Ball State, the key is for that defense, if they have playmakers step up like they had last week. We saw Keontae Newsom, Jordan Riley, a lot of these defensive players really step up. Sidney Houston also stepped up, forcing a fumble. Riley and Newsom each had 7 total tackles, so with the Ball State offense, it's been a little inconsistent, with the quarterback carousel, which I'm sure we'll get into. But defensively, Ball State, if they could repeat last week's effort, I think it could be a good day for the Cardinals tomorrow.
Yeah.
That Toledo game was just really weird. When we even look back at the statistics, it looked like Toledo statistically played better than Ball State. But as Ryan said earlier, it was that Ball State defense that was super key, taking on a Toledo team that, by the way, is now bowl eligible and going to be having a heck of a game against Miami. But the big thing is with Ball State, they have some weapons, and we talk about the quarterback carousel as we get towards the end of the season. Now I think finally it seems like Ball State is going to have an idea of what the quarterback situation is going to be. So if it's going to be Kyle Kelly, we know that's going to be a lot of rushing. That's his thing. He did throw the ball a little bit more, which is good for him. But again, the big thing is it's probably going to be a run-heavy game against Central Michigan. But overall for Toledo, again, the big thing we have to remember, it wasn't until the last 3 minutes that Toledo was finally able to score a touchdown. If Ball State can have their defense put together an entire game and limit mistakes in that fourth quarter, I think that Ball State could have beat Toledo. And then I think if they come into this weekend Central Michigan, I think it can be a heck of a close game.
Yeah, I think you guys both hit the nail on it when you guys said that Ball State's defense really shut down the Rockets, and they did. I mean, Toledo, we all know, has a high fire-powering offense, and they had a lot of, it just seemed like they weren't really in rhythm. They were kind of struggling to find their groove. Obviously, they got that late touchdown in the fourth quarter, but Ball State was in that game from really start to finish, and a shame that they couldn't pull it off. But again, a great defensive performance, and I kind of want to move over to the offense now, guys. You mentioned kind of seeing that quarterback carousel is the way you put it. Who do you guys think kind of has proved the most and deserves to be the Cardinals' starting quarterback going forward?
This is a really tough question, because I think that all three of them, and we're like barely halfway through the season, I guess a little bit more than that now, but you look at the three guys they have. You have Caden Samanza, who came in the second half against Kentucky, started the next couple of games, showed, I think, a really, really good performance against Kentucky. And I think that that's something where you're coming in at least somewhat unexpected on the road in an SEC environment. I think he went something like 15 for 21 with a touchdown, no turnovers. He was fantastic in that game, but then got a bit more inconsistent as the season continued, struggled with the interceptions as well. And then they turned it back to Lane Hatcher, and I think what Hatcher provides is he provides experience, he provides leadership, which is something when the team has been struggling like the Cardinals have, and you're looking for someone to kind of step up and take command when the team is kind of maybe not the best morale-wise just because of, they haven't been winning as much as they would have liked. I think Hatcher provides that leadership. I think he's got the strongest arm of the three. And then Kyle Kelly, I'd say probably the least consistent and the least developed as a passer, but his athleticism and his dynamic running ability is light years ahead of not just Samanza and Hatcher, but ahead of most quarterbacks in the MAC, I'd say. It's something where you don't know, is he going to hand it off to Cooper? Is he going to keep it? He can throw the ball, and he can make some good throws. I think he had just 16 passing attempts last week against Toledo. So I think with Kyle Kelly, it's something different. It's something new to shake up the offense, keep the defense on their toes, but you do limit the playbook a little bit when you have a run-first quarterback in there. So what I would probably do, I still think Hatcher should start, in my opinion, but I would have 15 to 20 design plays for Kyle Kelly. I just think Hatcher, he opens up the playbook. I think he's experienced. I think he's, a really good leader because he's been, I think, at 4 different colleges, including Ball State. I think he's 24, 25 years old. So I think his leadership and also just his arm strength, I think really opens up the playbook more than any of the other two quarterbacks can. So if it was up to me, it would be Hatcher starts, Kelly gets 15 to 20 snaps, give or take, based on how the game's going. But what I think will happen, because the Cardinals were so close against Toledo last week, I think they might just roll with Kyle Kelly. That's speculation, just based on the fact that they were competitive with one of the best MAC teams. And at some point, you just got to look for stability. You owe it to your team. This is the 8th game of the season tomorrow. You owe it to your team to have some stability down the stretch when you can.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. Like you said, 8th game of the year, and when we're talking pre-show, who's going to be the quarterback? For most schools, that's not what they're dealing with right now when they're still trying to figure out who is going to be the quarterback long term. That's one of the things at Ball State. It's a problem. You can say whether it's a good problem or bad problem. It's up to you. But I do think that they are going to go with Kyle Kelly. Like Brian said, when you keep Toledo to a one-score game, that's good. But I do think that Hatcher overall is the better quarterback to be having just because – unfortunately, in Division I football, it's not like high school anymore. You can't just have a quarterback that can run the entire time and expect to really be successful. So
unless you're the Baltimore Ravens, but yes,
the Baltimore Ravens in the NFL. But
right.
It does not work for most people. So it's a miracle that Ball State had a very close game against Toledo. The hope is around campus that it can be a close game against Central Michigan. And while Kyle Kelly did show some attempts and actually only a few completions, we just know that he's going to want to run, and that's fine. But that's not going to work against Central Michigan. That's why Hatcher should be probably the quarterback that gets a lot of playing time. But I'm not in Coach New's head, so I have no idea what he's going to be doing.
Yeah, and as Ryan, you mentioned, the 16 passes for Kyle Kelly only was just 4 for 16. Did not have a lot of success through the air, but he did play well on the ground, had 18 carries for 90 yards, and we knew we would see that run-pass offense with Kelly and, of course, Marquez Cooper, and he had 16 carries for 60 yards, just 1 touchdown on the year, so the Cardinals are definitely going to be looking for him to really get involved in this game. And, Max, you mentioned a close game against Central Michigan. I feel like with these two teams, it doesn't get any closer. Ball State obviously look at the record, 1-6 and 0-3 in the MAC, and then Central Michigan 4-3 and 2-1 in the MAC. But these two teams are very similar head-to-head. Ball State and Central Michigan 27, 27, and 1 against each other, and it doesn't get any closer. A 17-16 1-point victory for the Cardinals last year at Central. Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of speaks for itself. It's a matchup that should be pretty even right now, and it's a matchup that obviously historically is very even. Last year, Ball State won on the road 17-16, as you said. And this one, it's one that Ball State, they're definitely more desperate. They need it to stay, bowl eligible, and I think they just need it just for their morale. I think that, of course, you'd love to win the next 5 and make a bowl game somehow, but I think at this point they're not even thinking about that. They're just truly embracing that one-at-a-time mentality. They're coming off a game against Toledo. Toledo's a tough football team. I think they need it for their morale. I think Ball State's desperation is going to be something that drives them in this one. Not that Central Michigan doesn't want to win. It's a division game. Central Michigan's won 3 of their last 4. If you take out games against Michigan State and Notre Dame, they're 4-1 overall in the year. So Central Michigan is, just a game out of first place in the MAC West. So they have plenty to play for, don't get me wrong. But Ball State, they're desperate. And it's bigger than bowl eligibility. It's just like, let's just get back in the win column.
Right.
100%. They're the big thing for Ball State, the football team. They understand, hey, it's homecoming. You'd think that there would be more people wanting to show up because it's homecoming. A lot more eyes are going to be on them because it's homecoming. These boys, they want to win. They are D1 athletes for a reason. No one wants to be on a losing team, and you hate to lose at home. So with only a few more home matchups, Ball State really it feels desperate to get a win, and I think that desperation can be helpful. We saw, just like we've been saying, how close it was against the best team in the MAC in Toledo. Now you can come up. We see momentum. That's a word thrown around in sports a lot. Ball State could be having some positive momentum off Toledo. They could be having some positive momentum, especially with a win over a Central Michigan team that, yes, they had a difficult non-conference schedule, but overall they were 1-3 on the road, or the Central Michigan Chippewas undefeated at home. So the big thing to take away from that is it's the fact that Central Michigan is not that good of road warriors compared to Ball State.
Yeah, and as you guys mentioned, that it also is homecoming, and if you kind of look at the history about how Ball State plays on homecoming, they've done fairly well. They're 53-37-2 on homecoming, but they've lost 5 in a row. Ryan, do you feel kind of like that Ball State football really wants to win because of its homecoming, or is it just desperate times call for desperate measures?
Yes, I think that it's both of those. I think that, quite frankly, this team, they have had some tough games, obviously an incredibly tough start to the season with the SEC opponents that they faced, Kentucky and Georgia. And even in those games, there were some bright spots. What's crazy to me is that when you ask me what's been Ball State's worst performance of the season so far, I wouldn't say Georgia. I wouldn't say Kentucky. I'd say the Georgia Southern game week 4 where they lost 40-3.
I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Completely outmatched from the start. With Georgia, they were 0-0 after a quarter. With Kentucky, they were 10-7 in the middle of the second quarter trailing.
Yeah, they had a lead after the first quarter against Kentucky.
I was there.
Right?
I took a picture of the scoreboard, so we'll never forget that. But yeah, so Ball State, and then obviously the win over FCS Indiana State. So I think, they're 0-3 in conference. This is, again, obviously, you're not mathematically eliminated from, winning the MAC West. You're not mathematically eliminated from winning a bowl game yet if you can stay alive with this one. But, yeah, they want to win because it's homecoming. There's a lot of positive energy around campus. We had the bed races today, a lot of fun festivities going on, some alums coming back, probably going to the game, family, friends. So there should be some positive energy at Schumann Stadium tomorrow. So that plays a role, but I think it's really also bigger than that, is that this football team just wants to win a game. And this is a team that's just, 3 years removed from going 7-1 and winning the MAC. So it's not like none of these
the bowl game back in
none
2020,
of these coaching staff members have been on a winning franchise. The pieces are there. There's people there that know what it's felt like. The Ball State fans, they know what it's like, winning the MAC in 2020, and then the year after, I think we were also bowl eligible where we lost to Georgia State.
Even last year, and I know, a huge part was because now UCLA current running back Carson Steele was great for the Ball State Cardinals. But I feel like they were right there with Toledo. We saw that game last year. They were battling with Toledo. I know, look at Kent State right now, but Miami of Ohio. The teams who I'm mentioning from last year, they competed with, and at some point we thought they could beat them. And now you're looking at Miami and Toledo. We'll get to that in a little bit, both sitting at 5-1, and they have a game coming up. But it's how will Ball State respond, and how does that year kind of look at this year and how does it play into the fact that Ball State did lose on homecoming last year, 20-16 against Eastern, and this year they lost 24-10 against Eastern. But it's kind of just changing that direction of the season and trying to go in the right path. So with that, I guess, Max, did you have anything kind of you wanted to add about Ball State and Central in this matchup coming up?
Well, I mean, when we were talking about last year, the biggest thing to remember, had it not been for that game loss against Miami, it would have been Ball State heading to the Bahamas Bowl. That's just how close it was. And I know right now people look at a record and they're like, oh, Ball State has one win. They've had to have some tough competition, like we mentioned. They played well against the SEC schools. They just haven't really recovered that much since Georgia Southern. And truly, up until the Toledo game, Ball State looked night and day different, but now we're starting to see them play a little bit better. And again, the word of the day, momentum. That is what Muncie, that is what the Ball State Cardinals football squad is looking for. Positive momentum from a close game against the best team in the MAC. So the question now remains, can they beat Central Michigan? It should be close. Central Michigan is a team that, yes, I know they've had some difficult losses, but then when I look at the MAC game, they had a close one against Eastern Michigan. They lost to a Buffalo team that has been struggling. They had a close one against Akron. Central Michigan is a team that's going to play close football games, and Ball State had a close one. They know what it felt like to lose, and I think they can try and turn it around in a close one against Central Michigan.
Yeah, and I kind of foreshadowed the Toledo-Miami, and before we get to that game, we got a lot of MAC games going on. Guys, MAC season is officially in full swing now with everyone in the MAC conference right now playing. So let's start off Western Michigan at Ohio. Max, let's start with you.
So that should be an interesting one. The big thing is Ohio is the team that I believe is going to be competing against Toledo in the MAC championship. I think Ohio should get the win over Western Michigan. But still, you never know at this point. It is nearly to November. It's getting towards the end of the season. This is when you're going to start seeing the upsets. So I predict Ohio to win, but truly at this point, I'm going to be surprised if Western Michigan can pull an upset.
Yeah, Ryan?
Well, I thought Ohio was starting to play their way towards a potential AP poll ranking later in the season, but they slipped up last week, getting upset by Northern Illinois 23-13. So there's some of those upsets that you were alluding to there. It's upset season in college football at all levels. So Ohio now a game back of the Miami Redhawks for the MAC East lead. They still definitely can play their way back into first place and end up playing in Detroit in December. It's a long way until December in terms of football at least, but I look at Ohio. I still think this team is very good. They beat Power 5 Iowa State. Their only loss besides that NIU game was to a pretty good San Diego State team out in the Mountain West, and that was week 1. So I do think Ohio is going to bounce back, and I think they win by a score of 27-17.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned the NIU loss. I feel like that's fuel for them to just go into Athens and just destroy Western Michigan. I have OU winning this one 38-16. I think Ohio's going to run away with this in the first half, and Western Michigan might get a touchdown late in the fourth as a garbage touchdown, but give me OU big in this one. Moving from one Ohio to the other, Akron at Bowling Green. Cardinals take on Bowling Green in a couple weeks, but guys, who do you have in this one? Ryan?
I got Bowling Green, and I think Akron, they played tough early in the season. They had a couple overtime losses back-to-back early on where they lost to Indiana in overtime and then also lost to Buffalo in overtime. And since then, they've also lost their star quarterback, DJ Irons, to a season-ending injury. And Bowling Green, just a couple weeks removed from beating Georgia Tech pretty handily on the road, so I think Bowling Green's the better team right now. Give me the Falcons 30-14.
Okay.
So I gotta agree with you. I gotta go with just Bowling Green there. Akron is a team that has been struggling really all year long. Yes, I know they played a close game against a Big Ten school and IU, and when we talk about the IU Hoosiers struggling this
Yeah,
year,
Ryan and I have talked that Indiana's not what they were in the Big Ten, and they're certainly not a powerhouse.
You
in the
still
Big Ten,
have
absolutely.
to realize that this was a Mid-American Conference team that was competing with a Big Ten school.
Sure.
That's a positive. But at the end of the day, I just think that Bowling Green is a much better team. They've had some close games against decent schools, and they are coming off of the win at Buffalo, and momentum is the word of the day. That is important at this time of the year.
Yeah, I have Bowling Green taking this one a lot closer. I have them winning this one 27-23. I think Akron competes. I think their defense stands strong in that first half, and then Bowling Green kind of pulls away, gets a few touchdowns in that second half to kind of run away. I think Bowling Green's ultimately the better team in this matchup. Now we're going to go down to Illinois, or go across to Illinois. Eastern Michigan at Northern Illinois. Guys.
I look at this one and I see an NIU team that's really impressed me over the last couple of weeks. I mean, obviously we talked about how they beat Ohio the week before that, dominating Akron. And then the week before that, they were right there with Toledo, losing just by a score of 35-33. So NIU, it's been an up and down season. They started it by beating Boston College week 1, then lost to Southern Illinois week 2. So this has been a bit of an up and down team, but I think Eastern Michigan, unfortunately for them, is catching them at one of their upswings. They've been playing well as late. I think it'll be a good game, but I'm going to take NIU winning 30-27.
I also have to go with NIU. I mean, when we look at NIU, they had not the same type of non-conference schedule. They weren't taking on SEC schools, but they did have not an easy non-conference schedule when we look at it. And now they're just now finally getting into playing some MAC schools, and they have had some success. I do think that NIU is going to get to hit 500 with the win.
Yeah, I have NIU winning this one. I feel like they're coming off such a high after beating OU, and your prediction was 30-14 for the Akron Bowling Green game. I have a very similar score for this game. I got NIU winning this one 30-16 over Eastern Michigan. All right, let's transition now back to Ohio as Buffalo travels to Kent. Guys, Knox, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, Kent State is a squad that really has been struggling this year. Buffalo started the year off rough. Now they are 2-5, 2-1 in conference, by the way. So Buffalo seems like they may be the better team. They did win in overtime at Akron. They did get a big win over Central Michigan. So I do think that Buffalo has the advantage over a Kent State squad that just really has been struggling all year long, and they're just looking to get a big win. I mean, their only win is over Central Connecticut State University when we talk about Kent State.
Yeah. Ryan.
Kent State, I mean, they've been playing tough. They've really had a tough schedule, and they've been playing hard. I mean, you look at the teams they played. They played UCF, Arkansas, Fresno State, Miami of Ohio, the Ohio Bobcats, two of the better teams in the MAC. And last week against Eastern Michigan, they tried to open the game with an onside kick, and Eastern Michigan ran back that onside kick for a touchdown. So this is a team, they're playing really hard. They're challenging themselves against some tough opponents, both in and out of conference. And I think it's going to pay off. I think that Kent State gets the upset win 24-21.
Okay, I actually have Buffalo winning this one. I agree that Kent State has played very tough, but to me, they've just played down to their competition. And despite all those kind of close games that you mentioned, I still feel like Buffalo's the ultimate better team in this one. So give me Buffalo winning this one 38-33. Now, we've talked about it before the show. We've talked about it during the show. The MAC game of the weekend, possibly MAC game of the year. Toledo visiting Miami. Ryan, let's start with you.
You said it, MAC game of the year, and who knows, maybe depending on how things shake out with this one and in other MAC games, maybe it's not the last time we see these two squads face off, because look, they're the only two teams, Toledo and Miami, that are left with undefeated records in conference heading into tomorrow. Obviously, after that, there'll only be one team. One of them will be 4-0 in conference, but Toledo currently leading the MAC West, Miami currently leading the MAC East. And man, this is one I went back and forth on. And you look at this one, Toledo. If they were to drop this game, there's 3 other MAC West teams right behind them, sitting at 2-1. Miami, they lost their opening game of the season to Miami, Florida. But since then, my goodness, have they been dominant, beating UMass, Cincinnati, Delaware State, Kent State, Bowling Green, and Western Michigan. And they put up together some really strong defensive performance, particularly in the Bowling Green and Kent State games. So it's a bit of a surprise, but I think the Red Hawks take this one, and Toledo loses sole possession of first place in the MAC West. Long way to go in the season, obviously, so this isn't an end-all, be-all for either team, but I've got Miami winning a thriller 28-27.
There's a reason why they're putting this game on national TV. It is going to be an exciting one. I think that Miami is going to get the win, and if you would have asked me maybe just a couple weeks ago, I would have for sure been saying Toledo, but when Toledo plays down to a Ball State squad, yes, I know there was a rain. Maybe it's a fluke, but it doesn't seem like Toledo is as perfect anymore. They seem to be trending down, whereas Miami seems to be trending upward. And in a matchup like this, you are going to need to be the team that's trending upward. Give me Miami for the win.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, Max, you touched it perfectly, is that Toledo's kind of not playing up to their level or as well as people would have thought they would have played. And yeah, I mentioned both teams are 5-1. But the thing with Toledo is that, yes, it was a 13-6 victory over a Ball State team who we know is right now at the bottom of the conference. But it could have been that trap game that we kind of talk about. It's tough to say with trap games, especially in a MAC conference when anyone can compete with anyone. But I feel like you have to look at that. My point on it is that this is a team that Toledo's coming off a 21-17 victory over San Jose State, 49-31 against Western, a 35-33 against NIU, and then, yes, they took care of business at UMass, and then a 7-point victory here at Ball State. But to bring that point across is that I think Toledo, you are right. These are games they should be winning by 20 to 30 points. And yes, the weather does play a factor. But honestly, I've loved the way that Miami's played from start to finish. Yes, you mentioned that game against Miami. But I still think Toledo is the better team here ultimately, and I feel like they really get their offense going. Give me Toledo in double overtime, 37-31. I feel like this could be not only the MAC game of the year, but possibly a top 10 college football game of the year. All right, so we kind of mentioned the MAC, and obviously with homecoming tomorrow, we're going to get back to the Ball State Central Michigan game and kind of go over the keys to the game and players to look out for. So, Ryan, what is your key to the game for Ball State to pull this one off?
I think it is replicate that same defensive performance. I think that you want to play aggressive, you want to tackle well, you want to have good fundamental football, stay away from the penalties and sloppy mistakes because, yes, I know the weather may have helped them a little bit last week, but my goodness, that was the best defensive performance I've seen from this Ball State squad in some time, and it was against a very potent offense in Toledo. So I think play strong defense, stick to your assignments on defense, and Central Michigan, they're -6 in turnover differential, so maybe make that number keep going down further into the negatives. Winning the turnover battle would be crucial in a matchup like this where the teams are relatively even, at least in a lot of areas. So for Ball State, everything you did on defense last week against Toledo, play that way again, and you should be in good shape regardless of who's at quarterback.
Love it. Max?
So for Ball State, it's going to need to be something where we're going to need to see the Ball State offense go off. We've seen Marquez Cooper. He has shown that he has talent against Indiana State, at least. He's been kind of quiet, but there's a reason why he comes in the year with 95 carries, 422 yards, but only having one touchdown. That is not something that he should be having. So first of all, he's my key player. But just the entire Ball State offense. Defense played really well against Toledo. Offense had some moments, and truly, if it wasn't for a dropped pass towards the end of the game, it could have been potentially a tie game against Toledo. So if the offense can get everything together, if they can play well for the entire game, Ball State can get the win. Whereas for Central Michigan, they're just going to they have some talent. They cannot overlook Ball State. Ball State is a team that, yes, they have a 1-6 record, and most schools are just going to be ignoring that. But Ball State did play well. We talk about momentum. So the big thing, like I said, for Central Michigan, don't overlook Ball State. It's an important part of the year. They still have a chance to make some noise. They would like to go bowling with the Chippewas, and a win against Ball State is crucial for that.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the defense that I saw against Toledo. And yes, the weather did play a part. But again, that was some great defense played by the Cardinals. I kind of want to talk about, and Ryan, I talked to you a little bit before about it, was how they would play on third down. And this is a note that we've been looking for all year long. They've really struggled on third down. And for me, it's for Ball State getting in third and shorts and third and mediums and not forcing themselves into third and longs. Because if they do, they're not going to have success, or we don't think just on the numbers. Again, just 5 for 14 on third down. They were 3 for 10 at Western. They've just really been struggling a lot on third down efficiency. So that's something they're going to have to clean up against Central Michigan, who has a really good run-pass defense. And that's kind of something I also wanted to mention is that Ball State, it's simple. Get your playmakers involved. get Kelly involved. Either he's going to be the starting quarterback, or you got to make sure he's involved because he's someone who could ignite an offense, and we've seen it before. And, of course, Marquez Cooper, who's played, I think he's played pretty solid. Of course, that Western Michigan game, I would say, was his probably last best game, other than that Indiana State game, at least MAC game-wise. But, yeah, he struggled, and I feel like you got to give a nod to the Toledo defense for really locking him up and kind of expecting the run a lot because we knew that's what they would do most of the game. But for me, for Ball State, they got to contain Jace Bauer, their quarterback, and he's kind of a lot like Kyle Kelly in the sense that he doesn't have a lot more success through the air, but he has a lot of success on the ground, and he was 181 with 2 interceptions last week. He also had a great game running, 20 carries for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns. So for me, it's for Ball State going to have to contain him on defense and get that offense rolling and using it to their home advantage. So I kind of now wanted to just talk about that feeling about homecoming and how big of a factor will Ball State kind of play into the homecoming effect. Ryan.
Well, I think hopefully it'll be a good crowd. Hopefully the home field advantage will maybe be a little bit more present than on a typical game day. I haven't checked the weather, but hopefully the rain stays away and it's a good, nice football day.
As it is right now, it's partly cloudy with 55 to 60 degrees. So.
That is textbook football.
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
Long as it's not rainy and windy. So about what you'd expect for this time of year as we start to head into the back half of October. So I just think there's going to be a lot of positive energy. I'm sure there'll be a lot going on in the tailgates and leading up to the game. I think there'll be positive energy in Schumann Stadium, hopefully a good crowd, and hopefully the rain stays away so we can have a great day for football. So I think definitely the homecoming, not even just for the team, but for the fans. More people are going to be going to the game, not just students, family, friends, alumni, other friends of the football program, and just of Ball State in general. So I'm excited to see what the environment's like tomorrow, and hopefully the Cardinals can pull out a win.
Yeah,
there will be a lot of attention on it because it's homecoming. This is one of those games, it's similar to senior day, where when you are an athlete and you have extra things going on because of this game, since it's been homecoming, they understand. They're the main event of what has been a successful week. They want to make sure that all the Ball State students can go home saying, this was a heck of a homecoming, and we come back home with a win. They understand that. As Ryan said, there will be a lot more eyes. There will be a lot more attention. If Ball State football ever needed more motivation, homecoming came at the right time for them. So I think the biggest thing is just going to be extra motivation, extra eyes on them.
Yeah, I couldn't have agreed more. Is how pivotal and how big it would be to win on homecoming and kind of get that direction trending in the right way, especially as they head into midweek action. And the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about in this game is, Ryan, Max, you kind of mentioned who your player is. So, Ryan, I kind of want to know who's a player to look out for the Cardinals in this game.
I think it's Keon Magwood. I think he's really stepped up to be the number one receiver of this football team. They've had some injuries in the pass catching department. Obviously, Brady Hunt, the tight end, who's probably the best tight end in the conference, in my opinion, he's dealt with an injury. He has not played yet this year. Ty Robinson got hurt in the Kentucky game. He's their number one receiver, as listed on the depth chart. Obviously, Hunt will catch a lot of balls, but he's a tight end. Those guys have both been out for some time. Hunt for the whole year, Robinson since week 1, and Magwood, he's really done a good job stepping up for this football team. So I think he's going to have a big day. I think that he's someone that if we do see any Elaine Hatcher and they do try to throw the ball, maybe stretch the field a little bit more, I wouldn't be surprised if Magwood is someone that he targets a lot just because he can run a lot of routes. He's a good playmaker, very dynamic, can change direction quickly. He's had some solid games already. In Western Michigan at the end of September, a couple weeks ago, 110 receiving yards. He's been spectacular. So if Ball State throws the ball a lot, which obviously that depends on who the quarterback will be, I think Magwood is someone to look out for sure.
Yeah, and Max, is there anyone besides Marquez Cooper that you're specifically looking out for the Cards?
Well, as Ryan said, it really just comes down to who the quarterback is, because that's going to truly determine whether this will be a pass first or run first thing. So, as Ryan said, I do agree with him that Magwood would be the top receiver. If it is going to be a Kyle Kelly game where it's going to be focused on the run, obviously, then it would be Cooper, who is the main person to watch out for.
Yeah, I gotta say, a player kind of sticking with Magwood in that wide receiver room is I'm going with the other wide receiver, Ahmad Edwards. I've been very impressed with what I've seen from this kid. He's shown me a lot of talent on the field, at least. Obviously, you look at the numbers. His most catches, it was against Georgia, 4 catches for 47 yards. But he's been putting up pretty consistent numbers for the Cardinals. And actually, Kelly threw a ball last week, and it was a one-handed catch by Edwards. It was a great play, and I feel like that was definitely a highlight in that Ball State game. So I was impressed with what I saw from him last week, and he's kind of only been trending in the right direction in a huge leadership role for that Cardinals team. So I definitely have Ahmad Edwards as my player to look out for the Cardinals. Now, we talked about both of these games. We talked about kind of the keys and everything. Ryan, what is your final score prediction, and who's pulling this one out on homecoming week?
I think that it's going to be a back-and-forth game. I think that both teams have a lot to play for. Central Michigan's trying to stay the course in the MAC West, get another step closer to bowl eligibility, keep their winning ways going. They've won 3 of their last 4 coming into this game. And Ball State, yes, we talked about the desperation, but also you know that they want to put on a good show for homecoming. It'll be back and forth, but I'm going to give it to the Cardinals. I think that the defense is going to step up again, and I think the offense will do just enough. So give me Ball State 21-17.
Okay, Max.
I think it's going to be an interesting game. I would like it to be high scoring, but I just have a sneaking suspicion that it's going to be a defensive battle and it's going to be fought in the trenches and be a low scoring game. I still think Ball State should get the win. I think it will be interesting. And I think it's just going to truly come down to some last-second plays. If Ball State, as we have said, if they were able to give effort through the entire game, if they would have, one mistake is what really cost Ball State the loss to Toledo. I think Ball State's going to eliminate those mistakes. I think Ball State should get the big win over Central Michigan.
Yeah, I think you are right in the fact that the weather may play a part, and also that these teams are coming off really great defensive performances. And that's kind of where I feel like the offense will take over. And I actually have this one in a much higher scoring game. I have Ball State taking this one 31-27. I think they get their second win of the season, their second home win, and their first MAC win, and really trending in the right direction. I feel like they have enough offensive pieces. They've had a full week to kind of go over what they want the scheme to be, and I feel like they could pull this one out on homecoming. Now, guys, we talked about kind of like the MAC football, obviously the Ball State Central Michigan game. Let's transition over now to kind of like that Power 5 and top 25, or more importantly, our top 6 and our rankings. Max, let's start with you for your top 6 teams right now in the country.
Well, number 1, and I do agree with the AP and the coaches poll and the fact that Georgia is the number 1 team in the country right now. Here's the thing, though. I do not think that Georgia is going to repeat as the national champion. I'm just basing on what I've seen right now. Georgia has a lot of talent. This Georgia team has graduated some great players. And yes, I understand that their top receiver in Brock Bowers is out. But Kirby Smart is someone who knows what it takes to consistently get the machine known as Georgia to continuously have bodies. It's similar to Alabama from a couple years ago where it was always Alabama, Alabama, Alabama. Now Georgia has overtaken them as Georgia being the best team. Number 2 is going to be Michigan now. When we look at the end of the season, I am someone who's looking to the end of the year. Whoever wins Michigan, Ohio State is going to be the one to leapfrog into 2 at the end of the year. But right now, Michigan has been looking so incredibly competitive in the Big Ten. Number 3, I have to give it to Florida State. I mean, since day one, getting the big win over LSU, there's a reason why in preseason they had a quarterback being as a potential Heisman winner. They have some great defensive players as well. Florida State is a good team. I know the ACC is very confusing. No one knows what's going on right now, but just Florida State has seemed to be the one consistency in the ACC of being a great team. And then number 4 is Washington. I mean, Michael Penix Jr., the former IU quarterback, has been able to help the Washington team be competitive. There's a reason why they had College Game Day at Washington against Oregon. I mean, I can't imagine years ago having people caring this much about Washington. They look really good. Michael Penix Jr. has been someone who, in all likelihood, could win the Heisman this year, which is, again, if you would have seen his time at IU, I would have never expected to have him in a Heisman conversation. He has been looking very well. There's a reason why Washington is number 4. Number 5 is Ohio State University and the Buckeyes. Ohio State is always going to be someone that is competitive. I know early on they had a really close game against a terrible IU team. We can't exactly hold that against them. I just cannot put Ohio State over Michigan right now. The big thing is if they play a close game against Penn State, we will get to the Penn State-Ohio State game later. I will continue to keep Ohio State in the number 5 spot on the outside looking in. If Ohio State is able to have 2 or 3 scores over Penn State, that's going to show that, hey, they may be the best team in the Big Ten. So right now have them as 5, and it's really key for them to do well against Penn State. And the number 6 is Oklahoma. Listen, when you have a Texas squad that was ranked so high, everyone, just like every single year, everyone's always like, oh, Texas is back because they win one game, and then Texas ends up screwing up.
I couldn't agree more.
Then
every year.
Now Oklahoma has shown that, oh, hey, we are still a good school. Oh, hey, we are someone who's going to still try and be competitive. And when we look towards the end of the year, when we have Georgia go through the sawmill of the rest of the SEC, when we have the Big Ten finally figure out who's good and who's bad, don't be surprised when we see Oklahoma sneak their way up into the top 4.
Yeah. I love it. Ryan, how about yours? I saw yours was a little different, so let's talk about yours.
Yeah, number 1, I have Washington. And simply for me, they check all the boxes for me when I look for who's the best team in the country right now. They have an average margin of victory of 23.5. They have a big win against a top 10 opponent in Oregon that neither Georgia or Michigan have a win like that. They have played a pretty good schedule because, remember, the Pac-12 is the best it's been, I don't know about ever, but certainly in a long time. Looking at their schedule, they've been pretty dominant except for that Oregon game last week where they won a back-and-forth game by 3 points. And the only other game where they've been close in is that Arizona game back on September 30th. They won 31-24. And initially, I kind of had that as a red flag where, whoa, maybe that's not a game that they should have been that close with. But Arizona is a team that took USC to overtime. Yeah. And Arizona is a team that just demolished Washington State last week. So Arizona making that game look understandable for Washington. That's really the only game other than Oregon that they've been close in. So I think Washington has an incredible resume. They passed the eye test. They have a quality win. And they've got, in my opinion, the Heisman Trophy winner if the season ended today, and Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback. At number 2, I have Oklahoma. I think that their win against Texas might be the best win in the country. I just can't put them at 1, though, because outside of that, their strength of schedule isn't as good as Washington, in my opinion. But obviously, they'll have times to prove themselves, and who knows, maybe Oklahoma and Texas will meet again in the Big 12 championship in December. At number 3, I have Ohio State. And I think that that's because the win over Notre Dame, which was on the road against a top 10 team at the time, maybe doesn't look as good as it did at the time because Notre Dame has lost another game since then. But that win over Notre Dame still looks good. And Notre Dame beating USC.
Coming off a 48-20 win against USC, exactly.
And also Ohio State's win against Maryland still holds some weight for me. Maryland was 5-0 going into that game. A lot of people thought they should have been ranked at the time. They ended up pulling away in the second half, beating them by 20. So that's something that I still take into account. It's not quite a ranked win technically, but it's kind of in that vicinity. And then also you look at Ohio State, what kind of prevents them from really being any higher than number 3 for me is that outside of that, their schedule is Indiana, Purdue, Western Kentucky, and Youngstown State. So, again, this is a team that's going to play Penn State, and we're going to talk about that soon. They're going to play Michigan later. They're going to have plenty of chances to prove themselves, and if they run the table, or if anyone in the Big Ten runs the table, quite frankly, they very well could be at number 1 when it's all said and done. And at number 4, I have Georgia. In our earlier instances of the show, I had them outside of the top 4 because they hadn't had a quality win against a ranked team. They finally did get that, and they beat a ranked team in Kentucky, and they did so in dominant fashion, which is something that I was waiting to see from Georgia because they really struggled early in the season when it comes to getting off to good starts in their games. They played some inferior opponents both in and out of conference that they got off to really slow starts against South Carolina. They were down 14-3 at half at home. Auburn they were tied with like 3 minutes left. So the flaws from earlier in the season is why they aren't higher. I don't have teams as placeholders because of what they did in years past. I have my initial rankings at the start of the season is my sort of projections on how good you are, and then after that, you got to go earn it from there. In Georgia, again, they play Tennessee later, they play Florida later. They'll have chances against quality opponents to make their case, but other than that Kentucky game, they haven't been as dominant as you would like, and they haven't had the strong schedule, or at least the top 10 opponents that some of these other teams have had that I have in front of them. So that's why I can't put Georgia any higher, and also Max mentioned it, Brock Bowers being hurt. Brock Bowers is going to be playing on Sundays a year from now. He'll probably be a top 10 pick, maybe even top 5, who knows. That's a big blow for them. And number 5, I got Florida State. I think this is a team that is very good. That win over LSU is still a good one, but it looked a lot better week 1 than it does now because LSU maybe not as good as we thought they were. I think LSU might have been ranked 5th heading into the season, and now they're maybe in the low 20s. So, again, that's something where it's weird, where Florida State didn't do anything bad since then, but that win, maybe not what we thought it was at the time, but they still are right there at number 5 for me. Close calls against Boston College and Clemson early in the season. They have an opportunity coming up against a ranked Duke team to make another statement at home, a Duke team that they've never lost to ever, which is quite interesting. And then at number 6, I have Michigan. And this is going to sound weird because I put them at 6, but I think this team can be the best in the country. I think that they have been so dominant, but their schedule hasn't given them a chance to prove it yet. Like, okay, that's great. You're beating up on Nebraska and Rutgers. Like, I cannot wait till this team plays Penn State and Ohio State. I still think they're going to win the Big Ten, but because of their strength of schedule, because they haven't played a ranked team, I really just don't think it's fair to have them in the top 4 right now. But my goodness, I really think highly of this team, and I think they're going to end up winning the Big Ten, but I don't rank based on hypotheticals. I ranked based on what teams have actually done, the product they've put out on the field, and taking into account who they've played and how they've looked against certain opponents. So that'll be it. Obviously, this is a week-to-week thing, but right now I have Washington, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Georgia in the playoff in that order, and then Florida State and Michigan as the first 2 out.
You mentioned that Michigan game or the fact that they haven't played anyone tough, and looking down at their schedule, obviously they have Michigan State tomorrow night, but again, that's not the same Michigan State team that we've seen in the past. And they actually have on November 11th, they have Penn State on the road, and then they're at Maryland. And that's a game that a lot of Big Ten East teams cannot overlook, because especially with Ohio State last year, that was a very close game against Maryland, and that was the second time that Ohio State was in a close one on the road at Maryland before they took on Michigan. And so that's why I'm looking at it. They got 3 very tough games, in my opinion, at the end of the season with Penn State, Maryland, and, of course, with Ohio State. Now, I'm going to mention my 6. I'm going to go 1, 2, 6. And starting off with number 1, I have those Michigan Wolverines. I still think, you mentioned, they are the best team in college football. And, yes, they haven't played anyone tough yet, but that's really not on them. That's kind of on the schedule. And they've absolutely dominated everyone who they've played. The most points anyone has scored against Michigan this season is 10. On the road, Michigan held Minnesota to just 10. And yes, I know Minnesota is not a great team, but when you're putting up 52 on the road and holding a team to just 10 points, and that was their most points they've scored. They've dominated. Their defense has been incredible this season. It's been great to watch. Obviously, they took care of business last week against Indiana, 52-7. After Indiana took that 7-0 lead, they haven't looked back, and this Michigan team is as good as anyone. And I just think they're the best team in college football, and that's why I have them at number 1. At number 2, I did have them sliding down since last time, the Georgia Bulldogs. You're right. Other than that Kentucky game, they really haven't shown me a lot, and I think the only reason they are too is because of how well they played a Kentucky team that had all this confidence and all the swagger and was just knocked down by Georgia in Athens, that 51-13 game. Even Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt's a team that we know is not a great team in the SEC. They really haven't been for a while. Getting a 37-20 victory isn't anything to be too proud of anytime you win on the road, but Vanderbilt's not the best in the SEC. They're not even close, so I wasn't too surprised. I was surprised the fact that Georgia didn't win by 20, 30 points in that one. But again, Georgia is still a fantastic team. They're still yet to lose in 2.5 years, Ryan. So I still have them at my number 2 spot. At number 3, they have finally showed me something, and I'm very glad they have, and tomorrow they're really going to show me something, is the Ohio State Buckeyes. And to me, it's those kind of last 4 games that I'm really looking at. That Western Kentucky 63-10 victory, that was when we finally saw the Ohio State offense erupt, and we thought, okay, they're back. They're going to go into South Bend and knock the floor against Notre Dame. They won by 3 points, game-winning touchdown, and I still talk about that. It should have been a pick at the end of the game, and Ohio State should not have won that game. They have, and they've looked really impressive. Yes, a 20-point win against Maryland. They were down 10-0 and had no confidence. Then Talia Tagovailoa threw that pick 6, and that really got Ohio State's offense going, and that kind of got really them going for the rest of, well, what we talk about it is they controlled it all against Maryland in that second half, won 17-0 in the fourth quarter against Maryland, and then, of course, went into Purdue and dominated the Boilermakers. And we weren't talking about, this could be an upset at all, but Ohio State and Purdue do have some tough games against each other, especially the last time was in 2018, I believe, when Purdue got that huge upset against Ohio State on primetime, and Ohio State went into Purdue and simply dominated. I think Kyle McCord looked his best than he's ever looked. 16 for 28 may not shock you, but 276, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, a very impressive win for Ohio State. And yes, that Penn State game, Ryan, I can't stop talking about that one, but we got it coming up in a little bit here. But I have number 4 is Washington. I think Washington's been dominant. And you mentioned that Arizona game. This is an Arizona team that has played a lot of opponents very tough and really challenged them. And for that, that's why I give Washington the edge, is that they've really played fantastic this season, and Michael Penix had an incredible game. 22 for 37, 302, 4 touchdowns. He did throw that 1 interception, but got the win against Oregon, and we know Oregon is a fantastic team. So a huge win for Washington. That's why I have them in my number 4 spot. At number 5, I have Florida State. You mentioned that LSU win. LSU is still a top 20 team. They are ranked 19th. They're still 5-2, so they're still definitely a good team in the SEC. Maybe not what they were last year, a couple of years ago, but I think Florida State still is very talented, and they have I wouldn't say the most tough game coming up, but Duke is definitely going to challenge them defensively. So I do have Florida State in my number 5 spot. At number 6, I have the Oklahoma Sooners. I was debating between switching them and Washington just because I feel like their wins are so similar, but what put Oklahoma down at 6 is, to me, I thought Oregon was just the better team opposed to Washington, and that's why I felt like what Washington did at home was very impressive. Whereas we talked about Oklahoma and Texas at a neutral location. Kind of both teams were really home for that game, and Oklahoma is as good as anyone in my opinion. But I need to see a little bit more from the Sooners if I can really believe if they belong in my top 5. So that's why I have right on the edge at number 6. So to go over Michigan at 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, Washington 4, Florida State 5, and Oklahoma at 6. And now we can finally start talking about it. We mentioned we were talking about other games. Penn State at Ohio State, a Scarlet out at noon. Max, let's start with you. What are your expectations for this game?
Well, my expectations are that Ohio State will get the win, but I do think it's going to be a close one, and I think this is going to be a really fun one. Penn State is a squad that has been on the outside looking in all year long. Everyone since the beginning and even in preseason has been talking about Michigan, Ohio State be the best squads in the Big Ten. Penn State has been playing well each and every single week, and they just haven't been able to be showing that they've been playing well just because, hey, they're competing against 2 very quality squads. So I do think that, like I said, Ohio State will get the win, but this is going to be a really fun one. This is the game of the week.
Yeah, Ryan.
I think that this one, when you look at this, I think because it's, at least in the AP poll, it's 3 versus 6 right now. I think whoever wins this one should probably potentially go as high as number 2 in the country, just looking at how big of a win this would be, especially if it's Ohio State and they already have a ranked win under their belt. I think the Buckeyes are better. I think their playmakers are going to do their thing. I think they have the advantage at the skill positions. Having this one at home is huge as well. Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, Kate Stover, they've got those playmakers. Not that Penn State doesn't, but I just think Ohio State is a little bit ahead of Penn State right now, so I think the Buckeyes take it 41-27.
Wow. That might be a first time. I was going to get into like a lot of it, but when you said that prediction, I have Ohio State winning this one 41-27 as well.
Oh, there you go. I think that's the first time on the show we've had it.
Great minds think alike,
All
right? I think Ohio State ultimately is the better team in this one. I think they are more talented than Penn State, and their offense has really gotten going. They've showed me a lot of great signs in the last 2 weeks. And yes, Penn State, you look at them and they're kind of, I feel like, a more quiet team in the sense that they're still undefeated. But their biggest win that I'm looking at was that 31-0 win against Iowa. And Iowa, at the time, it seemed like a very impressive win. Not really anymore. I mean, Iowa's still a good team, but I mean, that's a head-to-head matchup, and Penn State won 31-0. It's a good win for them, but I feel like Ohio State's resume speaks a little bit higher. I feel like they have more playmakers. You mentioned Marvin Harrison. Also, watch for TreVeyon Henderson to go off. He had a big day against Penn State last year. Ohio State's defense in Happy Valley last year made a lot of great moves for the Buckeyes to really transition that game from an offensive game to a defensive. And Ohio State was able to pull away against Penn State. But it was a close game between two teams, and I feel like, Ryan, this is like the next biggest rivalry in college football. I mean, it's Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan, and I feel like Ohio State and Michigan are like the big brothers, and Penn State's the little brother right now. And I just feel like Ohio State just has a little bit more talent than the Nittany Lions. As you said, give me the Buckeyes winning this one 41-27. All right, let's transition now over to the SEC. Tennessee at Alabama, and last year Alabama Tennessee, an incredible game, maybe game of the year in Tennessee. They pulled the victory out 45-42. But is this a different story? Do the Vols get the win, or does Alabama get back on track? Ryan?
I think we're going to see history repeat itself. I think that with Alabama, ever since they lost to Texas, I think there's kind of been this notion that since then it's been all sunshine and rainbows when it hasn't. After that, they looked really bad against South Florida. I think it was like 3-3 in the third quarter or something ridiculous. Last week, they struggled against an Arkansas team, just beating them by a field goal, and that Arkansas team still hasn't won an SEC game yet. So Alabama, they're a good football team, but they're not what they were. In Tennessee, yeah. I just trust their offense more. Alabama, they seem to have finally found some stability with Jalen Milroe under center, but they've had a lot more quarterback problems than Tennessee has had. Joe Milton's been having a solid year taking over for Hendon Hooker, who is now in the NFL with the Detroit Lions. So this was a great one last year. It was a Tennessee win last year, and I think Tennessee makes it 2 in a row in this rivalry. Give me the Volunteers 31-24.
Okay.
When I look at this matchup, I keep going back and forth because it really feels like it did 1 year ago where, hey, you're seeing all the Tennessee alumni making sure to hype up the Volunteers. Tennessee seems to be the much better team than Alabama. Alabama has not looked impressive this on. Maybe I'm just an idiot and I just cannot choose to bet against Alabama that many times this year because there's something about Alabama. I don't know what it is. I just feel like Alabama is going to get the win. Nick Saban is a heck of a coach. I know people now have just been writing off Alabama as not being good. And yes, they haven't been playing as well. There's a reason why Nick Saban has been able to lead Alabama to so many wins over the years. He has experience. I think he is going to be able to outcoach Tennessee and give Alabama the win.
Yeah, I think Alabama still is very talented, but what you both said is that they're not the same Alabama Crimson Tide that we've seen for the past, 10 to 15 years now, it seems like. And I just feel like Tennessee's just got a better run scheme, and I feel like that's what's going to put it over. I also feel like Tennessee's a little bit better defensively. Give me the Bulls winning this one in Tuscaloosa, 23-16. Now we've gone to the Big Ten, SEC. Let's move over to the Pac-12. Utah at USC. USC trying to bounce back after what could have been a possible college football ending playoffs game. Ryan?
Yeah, I think that USC is a pretty good team, but I still think they're the fourth best team in the Pac-12. I think that Washington and Oregon are better than them, and I think after this week we'll be able to say that Utah is better than them. I think the Utes are going to get a win. USC, we know that they have Caleb Williams, who even after that disappointing performance in Notre Dame will still likely be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft in April. But I just don't trust USC's defense. They had a close call against Arizona, giving up 41 points. Absolutely got dominated by Notre Dame, and I think Utah's defense is way better than USC's defense is, and I think that'll be a difference. And Utah was 2-0 against the Trojans last year, beat them in the regular season, and then beat them in the Pac-12 championship, which knocked the Trojans out of the playoff picture and then allowed Ohio State to jump back in despite not playing a game. So I think the Utes are the better team. I think the Pac-12 is just stacked, where I still think USC is probably a top 15 team in the country, but still the fourth best team in that conference, which is crazy, especially for a conference that hasn't been very top-heavy in recent years. I think the Utes take it. Give me Utah winning 33-28.
Okay, Max.
When I look at this Utah squad, they have looked very good this year. And the big thing about USC, as Ryan mentioned, their defense has just not been impressive. Not only just last week, but it's been multiple weeks where if it wasn't for the offense, USC would be losing. And, I mean, when I look at Utah, they haven't had the best schedule so far. They are starting to get into the much harder one. And Utah has been a team, by the way, that is so incredibly difficult to be at home. But if it was at Utah, I would for sure give it easy W for Utah. But I just feel like this is a USC squad that understands they cannot lose back-to-back. This is a USC squad that, yes, their defense has struggled, but there's a reason why they have been highly talented. They have some good players around them. I think USC can get this win over Utah, but I can tell you it's going to be a fun one either way. But I think USC is going to use home field advantage to get the win.
I think home field advantage definitely makes a huge part in this one. But I'm also kind of looking back at their other games that they've played this season, and it's interesting. We were all talking about Arizona's not a good win at all. Arizona is as tough as anyone right now in the Pac-12. I mean, they are competing with pretty much anyone they want, and it doesn't matter what you're ranked, what your record is, they will fight you to the end. And to me, looking at that game, USC against Colorado, yes, Colorado did come back, but Colorado is kind of leveling down to where we kind of thought they would be, swimming around 500 at this point. No one thought they'd be like 6-1, 7-0. So they've kind of hit back to reality, and that's why I'm looking at that USC win. It's like, was it really a great road win, or was it kind of an expected win and they should have won by a lot more? Again, they had a big lead going into the fourth quarter, but they still cut that a lot close. And that's a Colorado team that's coming off a heartbreaking loss against Stanford last week. So they're definitely going to want to bounce back. But moving back to USC, I think Caleb Williams and that USC offense is just too dangerous, and I don't think Utah can get them. And all is on the USC minds right now, the Trojan minds, are getting revenge on Utah. Not only from the regular season last year, but in the Pac-12 championship too. All they want to do is beat Utah, and that is what I think they will do. I think USC is a little more talented, and I think they bounce back and get a 45-38 victory over Utah. I think it'll be a great game, but ultimately the Trojans pull it out. All right, now our last conference and our last game of the week, actually, Duke at Florida State, and this was a game that we were kind of debating, should we even put it on here, but I feel like Duke is good enough that it is a game to definitely talk about, and, going into Orlando is a very tough place to play. We all know that. We've seen how that atmosphere can get, especially bringing it back to the Jameis Winston days with Florida State. But Duke at Florida State, are the Seminoles rolling, or is Duke getting a huge upset? Ryan.
Look, Florida State seems upset prone. I think they're a bit more vulnerable than some of these other teams. So I think they're on upset alert as we progress through the season. But not tomorrow.
Okay,
I think
there it
they
is.
squeak by Duke 27-23, but it'll be close, and Duke will give them a good fight.
Okay, Max.
I mean, Duke is a squad that, coming into the year, I always was saying, we just always pick against Duke. They're never very good. I remember watching all the pregame analysis for Clemson versus Duke, and I'm like, why are they putting this game on national television? It's going to be a blowout. Clemson is going to get the win. Not so fast, says Team Duke. They are able to get the win. And look, Duke is a good team, but there's a reason why they lost to Notre Dame. They're a good team. Yeah. They're not a great team. And I feel like Florida State is a great team. I think Florida State should get the win. I think it'll be close. I don't think it's going to be 4 points close. I think it'll be about a touchdown difference between the two. But I still think the Seminoles are going to get the win in Tallahassee.
After hearing your guys' thoughts and predictions, I'm over here thinking, like, maybe I should change it. I have Florida State winning this one 44-10. I think Florida State rolls over Duke. I don't think it's close at all. The reason why I put it on is it's two ranked teams. It seemed like it could be a high-leverage game, and it could be those games that you said that one of these Power 5 loses to like a 20-25 ranked team. So this is a game that you could definitely look at, but I do think Florida State is just a much better team than Duke. Even though Duke showed me a lot this season, and I've been impressed what I've seen from the Blue Devils, Florida State's the better team. Give me them 44-10. And that will wrap up episode 3 of Behind the Lines. Another great week, another great show. Max, we really appreciate you tuning in. And guys, college football tonight. We got homecoming tomorrow and then a lot more football coming up. I'm Caden Vincent alongside my wonderful partner as always, Ryan Stojitz. We'd like to thank you for listening to this week's episode of Behind the Lines presented by Victory Honda of Muncie.
This has been a production of SportsLink Digital Radio.